So ECE R100, which we saw in the last slide, is talking about a uniform provision concerning the approval of vehicles with regards to specific requirements for electric powertrain. Part 1 talks about the requirements for category M and category N vehicles, the electric vehicles, basically where their speed is greater than 25 kilometers per hour. So basically these are the passenger and commercial vehicles. Whereas part 2 of the ECR 100 is talking about the safety requirements for tier 1 supplier, basically the supplier who is providing the renewable electrical energy storage, REESS system. So in other words, this is a system which comprises of battery management system and some of the subsystems, maybe part of onboard charger as well, which is going to create the universal set of REESS. And then I've listed some of the annexures in this standard, which are having a reference to isolation management. For example, Annex 5A is talking about the isolation resistance measurement method at vehicle level. Annex 6 is talking about the onboard isolation resistance monitoring system. Annex 7 is talking about verification of the isolation resistance. Then let me talk about AI 038. So this is the regulation again for the same category of vehicles, passenger and commercial vehicles. And this regulation is derived from ECR 100. Whenever we are dealing with any regulation, we should always take care that we are referring to the most recent part of the regulation. For example, ECR 100, we are having revision 2 and amendment 5, which was in July 2021. AI 038 was also recently revised in 2021. And it is in revision 2 state. So part 1 is similar to ECR 100, which is at vehicle level, and part 2 is at battery and BMS level. We have similar annexures talking about the isolation resistance measurement method, isolation resistance monitoring system, which is on board, the method to verify this system, and then confirmation for or verification method for testing authorities. So it is quite similar to ECR 100. Then we have another set of standards, which is for category L vehicles. So basically the two-wheeler and three-wheelers, which is the predominant electrification segment in India as on today. So again, this regulation as far as isolation monitoring is applicable only when we are going to have a powertrain which is having a working voltage which is above 60 volts DC, as we just saw in the last definition. So as long as the vehicles are working with 48 volt battery pack, which is typically the case for low speed vehicles, probably these regulations are not applicable with regards to isolation management. Then we have AIS 156 regulation, again, which is derived from the ECR 136 regulation, which is applicable for category L vehicle, which are the two-wheeler and three-wheelers. So our focus is on ECR 100 and AIS 038, which are currently seeing a use case because most of the PVs obviously have voltages which are above the definition of high voltage. All right, so we just saw regulatory landscape, but let's also look at the standards, because standards is they're always one step ahead of regulations. And of course, regulations will follow standard eventually. Let me give you a glimpse of some of the standards which are again related to our topic of interest, isolation management. So we have IC 60479-1. So this is the standard which I already talked about, which talks about the human body model. And it also talks about the classification of severity levels for DC as well as AC shock hazards. Then we have 6469-1. So this standard basically talks about the onboard rechargeable energy storage systems and electrically propelled vehicles. So again, it talks about some of the isolation management techniques which are required at vehicle level. We have part 3 of the same standard, which talks about protection of persons against electric hazard. So isolation resistance measurement for voltage class B2 electric circuits, test for isolation resistance monitoring system and touch current specifications are listed in ISO 6469-3 standard. And when we have very special standard, which is, let's say, targeted towards insulation monitoring devices, which is IEC 61557-8. So the part 8 of this standard is talking about insulation monitoring device for IT systems. We are going to see what is an IT system and also the automotive context of this. So basically, the standard talks about different types of IMDs, their requirements, the DC IMD, the AC IMD, as well as the IMD which is required for a combination of DC and AC subsystems in an electric vehicle. So we saw